having children, going to work, and I'm just lying here sleeping, breathing, eating. And I realized, oh my goodness, upon my life, all the truths of the human race are going to be tested. Is there a God? Does he care? What's the purpose in life? And if there is no God, then why not have my girlfriend slit my wrist? Why not take my mother's sleeping pills? Why not end it all? I mean, who can face a life of total paralysis? And somewhere in there, in my anger and frustration, I realized life's got to be more than just getting born and growing old and then dying. There's got to be a God who cares. We're too significant. There must be meaning in all of this. I don't think I would have asked those larger-than-life questions were it not for my suffering.
In the decades following her accident, Joni's life has been marked by extraordinary accomplishment. Through her artwork, music, books, conferences, and radio and television programs, she has inspired millions of people throughout the world. In 1979, she founded Joni and Friends, an international ministry that has taken the love and hope of Jesus to the disabled and their families. Through it all, she has intimately known both the pain of suffering and the presence of God.
There are a lot of people who think I'm a strong person, and I'm not. I am such a weak person. I wake up in the morning, and honestly, I think, oh Lord, I don't have the strength for this. I am so tired. I am so tired of this paralysis. But when I start to feel overwhelmed, I'll say, oh God, I have no strength for this day, but you do. I have no resources, but you do. May I please have your resources? May I please have your strength? I can do all things through you if you strengthen me. Please let me borrow your smile for the day. And honestly, before the morning has hardly begun, I've already got a perspective on the day. I've already got peace in my heart and a mission to accomplish. And it's because I've been pushed up against God. And God has shown me some deep things about his purpose and himself that, for me, are so satisfying, so pleasurable. I wouldn't trade the wheelchair for anything. To ask why a good God would allow suffering is to ask why a good doctor would put a needle in the backside of an infant to inoculate him. The infant doesn't understand it. All he knows is that it's horribly painful. He can't understand that, in a way, this inoculation is going to prepare him for something in the future that he's not even aware of. And in the same way, God is a God of intention. He's got a purpose and meaning. And everything he puts his hand to is brimming with intention and meaning. So we can rest assured that although the purposes for suffering might be hidden from us in this present life, his reasons are always wise, they're always specific, and they're always good.
Perhaps the supreme demonstration of God's use of suffering and evil for good was revealed in the death of Jesus.
Crucifixion was invented a few centuries before Jesus. It is widely recognized as one of the most horrendous forms of death that any state could sanction against an individual. It was so horrific that Roman citizens were not permitted to be crucified.
So it's no surprise that there is a build-up of the forces of evil, if you like, shrieking at Jesus, attacking him, criticizing him, until finally they nail him to a cross.
They came to a place called Golgotha, which means the place of the skull. There, 2 robbers were crucified with him, one on his right and one on his left. Those who passed by hurled insults at him, shaking their heads and saying, "Save yourself. Come down from the cross if you are the Son of God." At noon, darkness fell across the whole land, and Jesus cried out in a loud voice, my God, why have you forsaken me?"
And he suffered, the Bible tells us, great emotional and spiritual agony because he experienced separation with his Father, and he experienced the actual sin of the world in his own conscious life and what it was like to feel and experience that evil and hurt.
It's the worst thing that ever happened. 3 hours of darkness. God himself dies. Inconceivable. Did God allow that? Sure. He allowed the devil to creep into Judas Iscariot and Pontius Pilate and Herod and the cruel Romans, and allowed the worst event in the history of the world. Why? For the greatest thing that happened, our salvation.
That injustice was redeemed by an all-wise, all-knowing, all-loving, all-powerful God. He could take those kinds of things and he can turn them in to the greatest goodness imaginable, the salvation that would be available only through him.
And only when we see that in the light of the entire longer story do we say somehow this was how God, as it were, drew those forces of evil onto one place in order to defeat and deal with them there, in order to make a new creation, beginning with Jesus' resurrection. And that's why ultimately we have hope.
So an unspeakable evil was transformed into an unspeakable good through God's wisdom.
Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die."
If it can happen on such a magnificent scale like that, if you can see in that one case how great evil can produce great good, if God lifts the curtain just a little bit so you can see behind the scenes there, it's at least possible to believe that that principle is at work everywhere.
This is so spectacularly wonderful that it gives us the hope that evil will never be able to be the last word about us, that there will always be a way of finding something good, that while the evil was still evil, it can redeem it and keep it from triumphing over us.
And Jesus answered, "I have told you these things, so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have trouble, but take heart. I have overcome the world."
That's a powerful statement. Jesus is acknowledging that because of the acts of humanity that open the door to evil in this world, we have pain, we have suffering. He doesn't try to cover it up. It's an inevitable part of life. And yet he tells us something else in that passage that's even more important. He says, "I have overcome the world." You see, we have real hope. Hope that's based on the central doctrine of Christianity. God became a man and entered directly into the suffering of the world.
When God became incarnate in Jesus, we are told that Jesus experienced the very same kind of heartache and suffering without sin, I admit, but Jesus was finite and he was subjected to thirst and hunger, to aggression, to hostility, to tragedy.
And when Jesus stretched his hands out on the cross, he was saying, "I love you this much. I love you so much it hurts. I love you so much I'd rather die than live without you." And those nails that went through the palms of Jesus went straight into the heart of God.
There's a wonderful hymn which we sometimes sing, which has a line, "And when human hearts are breaking under sorrow's iron rod, then they find that self-same aching deep within the heart of God." And that's a wonderful sense. God in Christ has been here. He has taken it. He knows what it's like. He is not unable to sympathize. He is on all fours with us.
I mean, Jesus was the most God-forsaken man who ever lived, so that he might in turn tell us, "I'll never leave you. I'll never forsake you." That tells me God feels, he empathizes, he cares about my pains. He felt the sting in his chest first, and that encourages me when I hurt.